Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Transfer Show with your two errant missing in action podcast hosts. Well, except one of them. I'm pointing this way, but I don't know if this works. He has been putting in a shift, hasn't he, while he's on his holidays, having his little free drinks while he's potting away to you. Whereas I abandoned you completely and I have zero guilt about that. However, we come back with a bang, Mr. Davis. It is Dave Davis. I am Trev Downey. I am podcasting to you from my field here in beautiful rural Ireland. Dave from a muggy, clammy Edinburgh. We're both absolutely sweating buckets into our t-shirts here to get this done and have windows closed. But it's worth it, Dave, because we've got stories up the wazoo.
Literally, mate, like you said, we've been on holiday and I thought, would it just wind down? And it's just accelerated. And today just feels like an optimal day, doesn't it? Where things are going to start to really happen. Yeah. There's a million and one things to talk about, even after the fact we've already signed, 5 players or whatever it is. There's still things happening big time.
Every single GIF I can think of or look for, which basically says something along the lines of, it is ours now. That's where I feel like we are going out there, like Louis Theroux says, walking around with our willies out and absolutely just showing the world what it is to be champions and to strengthen from a position of strength. And it's everything I've always wished for. And if the latest big thing gets over the line, oh my God, we're on a whole different level to anything I've ever seen. And I'm as old as dirt, man. And I've seen it all. This is unprecedented. This will be unprecedented if the last big story happens. And this is where we should start our breakdown today, because everyone's going to want to start there with the Isak story and the developments on it. Some people, Dave, will have, I guess, maybe moved slightly away from it in frustration. Most people from the very start believed it was too much, that it couldn't have been done. It's too much money. We can never do this. And then we just keep going out doing madnesses and the story will not go away and nobody will put it to bed. People are starting to believe that this could happen. Will you please fill people in who may have just stepped away from this story a little bit on the developments, like you said, that simply happened today? News now every day, and this is probably the most encouraging yet.
Oh, mate, there's been so much news or info coming through today. I was actually getting a headache, and we've got, I don't know if you get these in Ireland, those triangle ice lollies, like the orange ones that you put in the freezer, jubbly bubblies or something I've called. So I've just been necking them while sort of absorbing all the info and chasing updates on it. But, I mean, the Isak thing's been rumbling for ages. We'll be honest, we've said for weeks, for months, haven't we? It's a case of we thought we'd get one Isak, we'd try, but we'd end up with Ekatike. And technically we weren't wrong because Hugo is on board now. He's a Liverpool player. He's absolutely, he's in Hong Kong with the lads, no problem at all. But the Isak thing has just not gone away. And we've had those developments, haven't we, where we've seen him training alone and people saying, no, it's just a recovery for injury. We see, he didn't go to the Celtic game with the Newcastle squad and people are like, no, it's the right thing. Eddie Howe was, no, I've kept him at home, because it's the right thing. We don't want the spotlight on him. And we were all a bit like, hey, that doesn't really make too much sense. We then had Eddie Howe the other day also telling us, no, I'm expecting to be on that plane to Singapore, of course. Yeah, we're confident. He loves the club and everything like that. And then we got the bomb this morning, didn't we? Via, to be fair, the Geordie Patch journalist, I think it was Craig Hope from the Mail that had it first, that Alexander Isak was not going on the tour of Singapore, the 12-day one, with a quote-unquote minor injury. Remember that minor injury, Trev, where he had something that they'd done a scan and there was nothing showing up, a la Felipe Coutinho to Barcelona. And then, again, you were like, this doesn't add up. And as someone's mentioned in the chat panel, people who were injured, like Lewis Hall, also got on the tour. Eddie Howe was also in the past as Newcastle fans. And by the way, there's bound to be Newcastle fans listening because they listen to every pod at the moment just to shout at me a lot of the time. So welcome to all the Geordies anyway. But took Callum Wilson when he was injured because he's big on team bonding. So it just didn't add up. And then the news just started to drop, didn't it, throughout the afternoon as people suspected. And the beautiful Audi bomb on there, Isak wants to leave Newcastle United. Now, it was kind of interesting the way it was put by a lot of the Geordie journalists that it wasn't a transfer request. He just wants to explore options outside of the club, and look at all this. This is the beautiful thing for me. In the last sort of days, in the last hours, where the last period, whatever you want to call it, there's been loads of interest, hasn't there, or loads of talks. They tried to ship him to Saudi and Al Hilal. Nada there. He's not interested. As a few reporters have said, Manchester United and Chelsea, and fair play to Sweeney Todd, Chelsea came out and said, no, we've got no interest in this player. Don't be using us to try and engineer something or suggest there's something there. Like Hugo Ekitike, Alexander Isak wants to come to Liverpool. He's made that clear to Newcastle, as we've said. He's done his part, to be fair, as in those bits. And I think the one thing to say, and I'm not trying to sort of be harsh on Newcastle fans, we've been here, Trev. We've been in these scenarios, haven't we, with Javier Mascherano, Fernando Torres, where you're not quite the big fish in the pond and the bigger clubs, the more fancy, however you want to put it, are coming in to try and sweep your players. And sometimes it's just a case of get the best deal you possibly can. Now, there's a name, and I'm not trying to be derogatory, I'm going to mention Luke Edwards, and people will know that name. We're still adamant that it will be a disaster if they want him, that Newcastle are still saying he's not for sale. If he's absolutely not for sale and they're not countenance it, why, as per David Ornstein, are Newcastle exploring a move for Sesko at Red Bull Leipzig? Why are Newcastle also looking at Visser at Brentford and trying to do that deal? We all know the answer, don't we, really? So it just feels like this has got to develop, and we'll come to it on our next story. A Luis Diaz sale has probably got to happen as part of this sort of house player swapping chain or whatever you want to call it. It's crazy to think, like we said, weeks or months ago, I can't remember exactly, but we reiterated it. We thought we'd try for Isak, we wouldn't be successful, we'd end up with Ekitike. We've said that repeatedly on record. There's plenty of evidence on that. Trev, there's a serious chance we're ending up with both. And people will look at that and go, but do they fit? Can they play together? And people will laugh about 4-4-2 and all the things the Geordie said, etc. Now, he commented earlier in the chat panel, and he is a proper smug bastard, but there's a great article, to be fair, from Sam Maguire on this, who actually made a point that, and it's well worth it on his Patron, Hugo Ekitike profiles quite similar in some elements to Luis Diaz, but maybe more surprisingly, Cody Gakpo, that actually Hugo Ekitike, if Luis Diaz departs, becomes your multi-functional forward, as in he could play on the left, he could play in the 9, he could even, as I mentioned in a few articles, become the support striker. Isak's a 9, isn't he? We know that. He's your tip of your arrow to score the goals. But, Trev, we can't really say anything different. There's still a lot of things got to happen. There is nothing certain right now, let's be clear. But there's a serious chance Alexander Isak is coming to Anfield.
Couple of things, because people are going to want to hear some conversation about the reality of the move and how potentially real it could be. You've just basically teed us up nicely there with the last thing you said. Just on something you said previous to that, I would say, if we are going to fully walk around with our willies out, then who cares if the two lads can play together or not? We just simply do what the best teams do when they are strong, and they just buy the good players and then work out ways in which we can use them effectively. What if we had a situation where Isak and Ekitike split the minutes without ever playing together? Anyone complain about that? I'm not when we're looking at two big shiny pots at the end of the season. That's kind of where I go with that one. It's all about this statement of intent that we're making. It's easy for people to get bogged down in the money. It's also easy for people to say things that you and I say, which is, it's not our money, we don't care. The truth is somewhere in between. We just don't like to bother too much doing people's accounting for them. There are people who are really good at it. We've got Mo Chatra who can work through stuff like that and give people reasonable understandings of what's going on with the numbers. But if we are making this statement of intent, Isak would be that. And it's incredible we've got Ekitike in already. However, the tweets that came out didn't mention Liverpool, Dave. They mentioned about Isak and his want-away situation. So the question then becomes, where could Isak potentially go? Who could potentially be in for Isak? Now, we think, don't we, that Arsenal are pretty far down the road with Gyökeres at this stage. Chelsea have signed 2 strikers. They got young Delap, and they have the boy from Brighton, João Pedro.
Yeah.
Man United are no longer in the discussion when it comes to that. I don't think, and I don't see what. Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that brilliant? And I don't see why Isak would even consider that. So we then start having to look around for other potential places where he could go, and it gets less and less likely as you go down through them. The only real rival I can see to Liverpool in this situation, realistically, from the Premier League. And I've done the sums on the foreign teams too, and I don't think many of them are in a position either who could afford it. The only real rival I can see is Chelsea. Chelsea could just do something nuts. Now, you said earlier on there was that quote about, hey, we're not interested in this guy. Yeah. We don't. You and I don't believe a word that they say. We do believe fully in the madness of Sweeney Todd. That's for sure. Do you think there's a situation where something mad like they love doing, like they pop off Pedro or Delap on loan and just get Isak in? Are they a potential rival? Because we know they have the money and they are lunatic enough to do something like this with the stockpiling. Or do you see another likely club that could be in for him? Because what I'm trying to do is see how likely it is at this stage that the only ones in the conversation really are us.
What was that game in the 80s where you used to have, I think it was characters' names like Mr. or Mrs. and he used to flip them all out and he used to ask, has he got a hat? No. Used to
down like, guess who? Guess who? Yeah.
Guess who? That's it. Honestly, it's become like that a little bit with these clubs. Like, where could Isak go as a game show? Chelsea. It's not going to be Chelsea because, like you said, the signings they made, even with the madness and the different things they've got going on, they're chasing other players we'll come to, so you can knock them down. United, it's just funny they're not even in the conversation. As you said, Arsenal, Gyökeres, down the road. I mean, people said other things like Real Madrid are not looking for attackers. In fact, they're looking to trim their attacking scenario, which we'll talk about as well. People put PSG in the chat panel. Well, no, Luis Enrique's made it clear that he loves almost that Dembele as the false nine, moving Kavicha, Barcola, and alternating with Doué, those flying forwards, as they called it in France. He's not into that sort of big, number 9 style. He's not going to change that for Alexander Isak. They've got their setup there at PSG. Also important to say, there's been various reports, that Isak's camp are quite happy to, attribute back to them. He wants to stay in competitive football because this came out, didn't it? And a lot of people were thinking when Al Hilal got linked, here we go, a big sale to Al Hilal, stupid wages, loaning back to Newcastle. Could that be the move? And Isak's, his camp have been clear that he's not interested in that at all, which you never know. You can never say with certainty, but if you knock everything down, you are just left with Anfield as the only Guess Who tile.
It's giddy making. I'm not going to lie to you. I find myself giddy at the thoughts of what we could potentially do this summer. And here's the last place I want to bring this. It's the transfer show. It's not necessarily the place for these chats, but the giddiness is bringing me there. Let's just touch on it for a second. There's a big difference, as we've seen over the years, Chelsea being a prime example, between signing a load of fantastic footballers and them then being used in the right way to win the big trophies.
True.
But with the previous immediate success that we've had of being champions, the rhythms that are there at the club, the methods that are there at the club, the coaching that we have, in one a man who could eventually end up being our greatest manager ever. He has that potential now at this stage. I just feel, and kick me for being arrogant if you like, I just feel that there literally was nobody getting in our way if we get this guy as well. That's how I feel about it. Maybe I'm being naive, Dave, but it's hard to see too many people standing up to us. There are still probably some glaring areas of the team we need to address. We need to get a centre half into the squad. We would love this defensive-minded midfielder we've talked about for ages, especially with the fact that Grav can't start the season. But realistically, who's getting in our way, man? It's just so exciting.
The thing is, as much as we talk about football formations, players and different bits, the ultimate thing in football is goals win games and goals forgive a multitude of sins, don't they? You score more goals than the opposition, you win the game. It's simple as that. So you look at the attacking options of your rivals, and as it stands right now, and I've seen some stupid comments when I put this on a pod earlier to say, who's got elite attackers at their club? And I mean elite attackers, top level. Now, when you start going down the rivals, I don't think Arsenal have got any. There's a question mark against Gyökeres. He could bang goals. I'm not doubting that for a second. Saka's got potential, but I wouldn't put him in the elite category just now. Maybe a step away from that, could go into it. But right now, no. I look at City. Haaland, whatever you think of the cyborg, he's got elite numbers and he does elite things when he gets the service. Only a fool argues any different on that. But Foden fell away. You know, they didn't really replace Alvarez. Marmoush has got potential. But Haaland is the only elite attacker they've got. Trev, if we get Isak, you have three for me. Mo Salah, without doubt, best player in the league. Isak, number two, of course, as a striker in the Premier League. And also, I genuinely believe, as an attacker, and he doesn't obviously play right at the top, but Florian Wirtz, there's a reason why Real Madrid, Manchester City, all Bayern Munich, all the other big clubs in world football wanted that player. We would have three. And backing those up would be someone like Hugo Ekitike, as we've heard from all the data-related people who they think has got real potential, and others at the same time as well. So if you have those attacking options that just outstrip your rivals like that, as long as the rest of the stuff behind it isn't too bad, and it's not with Alisson, Van Dijk and all those, etc., I'm struggling to disagree with you. I've got to be honest.
What a time to be alive. Our next story is on potential ins and outs connected. We've heard the Rodrygo thing rumbling along. We've also seen a couple of places recently, including a return to form of bad news, Jimbo Pearce, saying that it was highly unlikely or that he wasn't considered a target for Liverpool currently. We know there's the Malik Fofana story, and obviously any of these further incomings, including Isak, will be linked to us getting some things nailed down. Diaz is the guy who will probably earn us the most money. Maybe Darwin Nunez could in a different world if he was going to Saudi, but he's less and less, it seems, interested in that, or maybe he'll get closer and closer to being interested if other teams can't pony up the right amount. But this Diaz to Bayern thing, I've listened to your shows while you've been away, and the only one more bored of it, man, than you is me. It is so freaking tedious dealing with this lot, and they're just like, yeah, we need some time to think, and we'll get back to you. This stuff about just if you are going to bid and get, don't tell me they need to quibble about money. I just don't see a strategy here. And so I know I'm throwing a googly in here, but we've already spoken about Newcastle. Is there a world in which Luis Diaz, a Premier League proven attacker, a Premier League winner, someone who a lot of Reds are very high on, could actually look at a move within the Premier League? We've all heard the stories. He doesn't like the climate, blah, blah, blah. So Newcastle is not going to be any more attractive to him probably than Liverpool, but it might be if they offered the wages. Anyway, talk to us about Bayern, and then is there any other likely outlets for Diaz apart from Saudi? Because I don't see him or Darwin going there purely for their career's sake.
Yeah, I mean, I sound like my 13-year-old niece with this, but I am so bored, like you, of this Bayern thing. Just make this new bid. And we keep hearing through various journalists, is it on the screen there from Romano? Bayern's new proposal is set to be sent soon as planned since last weekend. Like, are they sending this by carrier pigeon or something? Because it just seems to be taking like absolutely years. But I do actually suspect this happens, that from digging around this, yeah, Diaz's camp have been speaking to Bayern, and Diaz's camp are a bit sneaky on this, Trev. They've been laying the groundwork, especially to, and in respect to, Pipe Sierra, people all know who that is, from the Colombian side, with the stuff they've been providing him with, let's say. But I mean, the stuff that they've been leaking about, this is his net wage being tiny, not true. Also, as Pipe put it out, and we know where it's come from. Luis Diaz is only the 15th best paid player at Liverpool. So sorry, are we supposed to believe that Luis Diaz has gone around the dressing room asking for people's P60s to see what they earn annually or their wage slips? Do you know what I mean? Type of thing. It's all part of the narrative because he wants the new contract. He's not going to get it from Liverpool. Being honest, in short, for other Premier League sides, no, the Manchester City thing's dead, isn't it? They've bought their players in. Arsenal have got Madueke in, so it's not going to be there. We never sell to Arsenal anyway. It's not going to be Newcastle for reasons there. They've already got their wingers sorted, haven't they? With like Gordon, Alanga, they've bought in as well. It does feel like it is going to be Bayern Munich or no one, and I suspect this is almost like that housing chain, isn't it? It's got to be the dominoes of Diaz moves to Bayern Munich, so then we can move for Isak, and it's got to flow in that effect.
I don't know if you've ever experienced the horror of trying to sell a house and buy a house at the same time, but that's very much what it feels like here, that chain you're describing. And as you say, one domino needs to fall before the rest can. It's just very frustrating having to wait on these very, very, very delaying Germans to get their act together. Let's go to the Ibu Konate story, which you and I have discussed, I think, all summer long and in the pre-summer shows that we did as well. It was one that was rumbling in the background. The numbers were out there, for whether real or not, that he was looking to go from 80 to 200,000. I'm not sure how real those numbers are, but he was looking for a sizable jump, and you can't blame him for that. I think he's dead right to look for that. And Liverpool were balking at the figure. That's basically where we're at. Now, if you have at this stage not realized that Liverpool are not the easiest to deal with, even with their own players, when it comes to arguing about contracts, I'm not sure if you're actually a sentient human, because we saw it, didn't we, with Mo and with Virgil, two lads who in their right mind would want to see them go, but the club played hardball with them. They were upset. They were annoyed. They were pissed off.
Yeah.
Ibu's going to have to do the same thing. Him and his agent are just going to have to fight it out. The problem here has always been, we wondered whether or not the head was turned by the interest of Real Madrid and the interest of PSG. And it would not be many humans whose head would not be turned by such interest, regardless of our status as champions, because, he's not a Liverpool lad.
Yeah.
And he's got one career. So we did hear a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, and it was only from one source, that a contract had been preferred. It's probably pure fluff. But do we know where we are with this Ibu Konate story at this stage?
Yeah, there's been a few reports on the screen that Liverpool are back in talks with Ibu Konate and his agent. I'll be honest, I know the tweet on the screen says they received a new contract proposal from Sasha there. I've not managed to hear that or get that corroborated. I'm not doubting that info. It just, we would love to be saying, yeah, all your big journalists are saying it's on the verge of being done. Of course we would. We've been quite clear on what we think of Ibu. But as to reports we can get, Liverpool are back talking to the Konate camp. So we've got to see that as a positive there, haven't we? The big thing on it, though, Trev, realistically, is that it does seem Liverpool are, and I get this, prepared to take the gamble right to the end. And if they can't get it done, let him go on a free. That they're almost happy as it stands now to say, do you know what? We'd rather, like we did with Virgil and, Mo, try and get it into the last year because we don't want him to leave. He's better in the team. He's more valuable to us right now than selling him for a pittance that way and seeing what we can do. I mean, the one thing I keep thinking about Konate is, yes, you're right. He's got one career. He's a Paris boy. All those factors. We know Real Madrid have been in his ear. This is not a straightforward, simple decision. Anyone who thinks differently is not really looking at it. However, Liverpool couldn't be showing him more ambition than they're showing now, could they? This couldn't be a more exciting time to look at this project and say, look at what Liverpool are doing, basically. This is a club to be at, a destination club at the same time as well. And also, as Paul Joyce mentioned in his article and various bits, Mark Guehi is now still one to keep an eye on because that had gone cold, hadn't it? Because Palace had put sort of a ridiculous fee for a player with a year left there. And Liverpool were like, well, we're never going to match that. But as quite a few journalists have come to in the last sort of 48 hours or so, Palace are now back in a scenario where sense prevails. We're going to sell Mark Guehi, but we still want to get a decent price. Now, suggestions are that they're still looking around 45 million, which is still a bit rich for Liverpool's blood. I think we're still looking around the 40 million mark. However, that doesn't feel a big gap, does it? A 5 million gap in terms of transfers. I know, obviously, we all love to have 5 million quid in our account, but in terms of elite football, that is a very small gap. So, chatting to a few journalists today, as David Lynch said, Guehi to Liverpool is definitely one to keep an eye on. And from all the talks and asking around, Guehi still prefers the move to Anfield over anywhere else. So we'll see if that gets done as well. But yeah, we don't want to get carried away with the Ibu news, but there is positives. They do seem to be talking to him and his agent again.
Do you think the Mark Guehi move or the first team ready centre-half move is essential if Ibu stays, regardless of whether Ibu stays, or only if Ibu goes?
Nah, I think you've got to do it. You've got to get at least one in. You can't start the season with three centre-backs being Van Dijk, Ibu, and Joe Gomez, because there's injury question marks against two of those to start with, and you can't start the season with three set. You need four. Many have wanted 5 minimum, haven't they? They've wanted extra or an option bought in there. So we absolutely have to get another centre back in, no questions asked. For me, before the season starts, and I'm going to be honest as well. If your centre back collection is Van Dijk, Konate, Gomez, and Mark Guehi, that's the best in the league. End of discussion.
Could not agree more, which is exactly why I want to see that happen. Did you see the weird stories linking us with Charlie Cresswell? I find that weird because we've just let go the guy who was playing opposite him in the England under-21 team, who was actually younger than Cresswell as well, and many people would say had a higher ceiling. So I struggle with that one. It just felt like somebody saw that a young fellow was available and put two and two together and thought homegrown and went, yeah, we'll make that a Liverpool story. Is there actually any heft to that, or is it just fanciful thinking, do you think?
There is heft to that. He is one of the three real centre-backs that we've had a good look at as Guehi alternatives. Everyone knows about Hato, but we'll talk about that later. That's a non-starter now. He's been mentioned many a times. Yeah, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce him, but the young Italian 6'4" kid at Parma, I think he was 18 or 19, he's been looked at as well. But yeah, absolutely, Charlie Cresswell. And one of the big things that they do like about Charlie Cresswell is an aerial duel success of over 70%. Played at Millwall as well. So, used to getting kicked around or kicking people, shall we say, as well. Just won the under-21. And I get it. People say, well, hold on, Jarell Kwanzaa and that in and out. But, yeah, there's a lot of things that Liverpool like about Charlie Cresswell. It's still, if you ask me to bet, the smart money is still on Guehi, but I would not rule out Charlie Cresswell just now.
Sam, if you're still out there in the chat, let us know what you think of that aerial duel percentage. I know you like an aerial duel percentage. We will move then to our next story because we need to start knocking over these skittles.
Yeah.
Darwin Nunez, we've already mentioned. Federico Chiesa, we haven't. Nunez and Chiesa, along with Diaz, seem to be very, very much likely to go. It's becoming more and more likely as time moves on. And everything seems to have, as you said here, gone a bit quiet on the Nunez front. I still am hugely dubious about the Saudi thing for him. I think he has had the reality of interest from high-profile clubs like Napoli and Atletico. I think that probably does a job on him. I think the interest from Bayern does a job on Luis Diaz. And so we were looking at money from Saudi as being, vital to our kitty. That's what you and I both thought. But if these moves happen, I think they're going to happen at the death because those players will want to wait until the very end to see whether they can swing something that's in a major European league, preferably Champions League. So I think that's really complicating everything. Chiesa's in a slightly different field, and the Chiesa offers I've heard about from different clubs are so minuscule in comparison to what he was first worth. I understand we paid minuscule money for him, that I just don't see any great advantage to moving him on unless he's just literally not fancied by the manager at all.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, let's call them forwards, wide forwards. I mean, Chiesa, first of all, there's various links. I mean, it was quite telling that he didn't go on the 29-man tour to the Far East, and that's quite telling. And they said he had a minor injury, was the club line. Just for anyone that believes that or fully invest in that, Chiesa in that Stoke game scored the 90th minute, the fifth goal, and then was seen doing, the warm down all the bits with the S&C staff as well. So we honestly believe he picked up a minor injury in that period that keeps him at home for 2 weeks. I think, as Romana's a few reported, there's a ton of interest from Italy. And you mentioned minuscule amounts. There's been various stories, as it's there on the screen. Atalanta prepared to basically almost give us back the 10 million, isn't it, that we paid, and do an exchange, if you want to call it that, a refund, whatever you want to suggest it as. I think the key thing just on Chiesa, first of all, the tune, banging, absolutely brilliant. The player, not fancied by Arne Slot. I don't really know what more evidence people need, in all honesty. You saw the limited amount of minutes that he had. And also, as a young breakout star, you've seen him showing pre-season people, but we've mentioned him before, Rio and Gamoa. They've not wanted to block his pathway into the first team. Now, just to be clear, that doesn't mean playing 25 games at all. But when you look at Chiesa's minutes, I think it was 600, 700 across all competitions, wouldn't it? That could easily go to young Rio, couldn't it? And could be really good for him in the cups and things like that at the same time as well. So I think it's almost, I think they take their money back and just do it that way to get him off the books. Nunez, like you say, it just feels like what is going to happen. They're waiting for something. Are Saudi actually going to pony up, or is that just an old story that just gets thrown out there? I hope it's not, but we'll have to see. The two winger updates I don't know if you'll like them, Trev, but we'll go to them. We mentioned bad news, James Pearce. James Pearce was spot on with this the other night, by the way, and he got a lot of stick. That bit he put out that Real Madrid's Rodrygo is currently not viewed as a possible replacement. Technically, that's a true statement. And James Pearce tweeted it. David Lynch reiterated it as his info as well. The big reason why there's been talks with Rodrigo's camp, this family, as we've said before, Pini Jahavi, the super agent's been involved. Young Rodrigo, whether it's all Pini, ask his agent, ask him for it. Trev, €400 a week. For the basic wage ask was the info we got. I mean, that's Alisson VVD Salah levels, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And that's before bonuses and other things as well. So, on top of the fee would cost as well from Real Madrid. I think right now that's why that's just completely off the table unless something changes, and there's a DFS style sale basically in what he's asking for there. And what it's thrown into the mix is, as a few have said it or a few asking about it, Malik Fofana. Liverpool are having a real good look at him as an option. And people will talk about different options, but he would make sense for me a lot because he would feel like, for the right money, that young FSG style signing, the one they could develop and work with to make more at the right price point as well. Because obviously we're signing a lot of elite attackers, top level names, but it's always good when we're buying nerd style signings as well, aren't we, at the same time? So Malik Fofana is being looked at again heavily as well. So that is definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Fofana is still quite young, isn't he? He's still sub 22, I think, isn't he? So yeah, that's interesting. Something occurred to me there as you were speaking about the likelihood of the Luis Diaz move to Bayern and all the rest of it. It really is, when you think about what Rodrygo's asking for, it really is possibly one of the only destinations that Rodrygo could point himself towards as well. And I wonder is that kind of rumbling around in the background, and maybe complicating the Diaz thing, because they're, Bayern are not afraid to pay big wages. Maybe not that big, but do you think, have you heard anything about that? I find it weird that I haven't heard Rodrygo to Bayern and stuff. I think that's a bit odd.
No, I think, I'm not saying it isn't possible, but I think just in terms of where Rodrigo's been looking at or speaking about, I mean, he's ruled out Arsenal, isn't he? That they don't seem to be in the mix at all. And people said things like, oh, he could be PSG. I am intrigued to really see where he does end up, because he is clearly looking for a move, because rather bringing in Mastantuono, Xavi Alonso spoken to all these players about their attack and where they sees them. And various reports from Madrid, Rodrygo is going to struggle for minutes, and he's been told that. But if you're going to struggle for minutes and it's World Cup year, maybe don't start your demands with 400,000 euros a week if you want to get regular football. Just a suggestion, but what do I know, eh?
Yeah, and also for the record, that image, that graphic at the bottom of the page that you've got displayed at the moment is one of the best things I've ever seen. Right, last Liverpool-related story has got to do with Harvey Elliott and Tyler Morton, both of whom were linked with moves to West Ham, and those moves were obviously supposed to be transfers, not loans, but now that's what's being talked about. It seems as if West Ham have either gotten cold feet or are starting to muck about a bit. I'm not really sure what the thinking is here. I saw a lovely interview with Harvey Elliott, a very recent one, where he was asked directly about the future, and he just speaks so beautifully about the club. He's such a genuine kid. He says he loves everything about the club. He wants to stay here, but he has to think about his career. It's so sad that it's not going to be at Liverpool. But if West Ham are going to prick around and start talking about loaning Harvey Elliott, then he needs to look elsewhere. What do we know? And why is this loan thing suddenly come from a situation where we had been thinking about transfer fees?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we said it a while ago that Graham Potter has already spoken to Tyler Morton as well. He loves him, and Liverpool were expecting a bid for that. And West Ham had advanced and start speaking to Liverpool about Harvey Elliott. So it had the look as a few weeks ago, didn't it? This could be a nice little double deal, something around 55 million, maybe, something like that, and everyone's happy. And like you said, it's such a shame. It's almost a shame we can't put Harvey Elliott's heart and mind into Darwin Nunez and Luis Diaz a little bit, isn't he? Because exactly, he's saying all the right things, and he's come back early after the Euros. He's cut short his holiday because he wants to show Arne Slot what he can do. But as he's also been honest, he's got to be selfish, think about his career. Harvey Elliott also mentioned the World Cup as well, didn't he? That's one of his aspirations, to get in that World Cup squad. And in simple terms, this sounds horrible and it's not being derogatory of the player. There just isn't a future for him at Liverpool, is there, with all the changes and the players coming in? So, yeah, everyone was expecting that West Ham bid, but the last had digging around on it West Ham had asked about a loan with an option. And then Liverpool are kind of going, hold on, we were talking about a fee and all that. What do you mean a loan with an option? Liverpool wouldn't mind a loan with an obligation in that regard, which is different. So I am intrigued to see what happens here. It just could be one that, you mentioned happens later in the window. I do wonder about this one, and Harvey just sort of biding his time a little bit. But yeah, Liverpool are not amused with West Ham, is my info, because they got permission early to speak to Tyler Morton. They'd shown that real keenness and talked about doing a deal around Harvey Elliott. And now they're talking about a loan with an option. They seem to be a bit quiet on Tyler Morton. And hey, it could change. Who knows? But yeah, info right now, Liverpool are not too impressed with West Ham.
Now, unlike my washing machine and my ridiculously expensive Honda lawnmower, which blew up on me today, in a lovely welcome back from your holidays, Trev, now you can go back into debt again moment, we need to click through the gears here, because I've been dawdling on some of these topics because I'm delighted to be talking about Liverpool again. So we will blitz through the Premier League moves and potential moves that are going on. We'll start with Chelsea. And I love this one because Chelsea, it looks like, are being linked with Xavi Simons, the exact profile of player that Chelsea desperately need, yes? And also Jarell Hato, who we have had obviously very strong interest in. I think that's been clearly established, and seem to have decided to leave on the shelf. So Chelsea, with Simons and Hato, two players we were linked with and ultimately have decided that aren't good enough for us. This is a delightful story on so many levels, Dave.
I think it's brilliant because we've been quite honest all summer. I was desperate not to see Xavi Simons at Anfield, and now it looks like Chelsea are set to add him to their ranks of course, where they're short of attacking midfielders or players that can play on the left or in that attacking midfield spot, which seems absolutely bizarre. And it was just a weird deal. We knew Red Bull Leipzig were going to sell, and it kind of went quiet. I mean, Bayern were linked after us, but it didn't seem to be working. But it looks like Chelsea have stepped right in to do that deal and just add to their portfolio of attacking midfielders. And also a youngster that we talked about, Jarell Hato. Yeah, it does seem like they're right there for him as well. And if ever you wanted a good barometer of just how good this transfer window is, Chelsea are trying to buy two of our third choices, I think it's fair to say, in most positions, while we're landing big targets so far, touch wood. Yeah, Sweeney Todd is after our rejects. Brilliant.
You love to see it. Arsenal, who, like I said, are in the middle of some sort of a deal for Gyökeres. I assume that gets done. There's been talk about Etse as well. They've already got Madueke over the line. And interestingly enough, in a development I had not been aware of, you seem to think that Martinelli might be up for sale.
Yeah, they're just a strange club. I mean, this Gyökeres thing has been dragging and dragging and dragging. He's still not officially signed. We had a here we go from Fabrizio Romano about 3 or 4 days ago, but now it's kind of, the United have come in. I don't think that'll happen. I think he still wants Arsenal, but it just seems to have dragged so long. As you mentioned before as well, Noni Madueke, I mean, when that happened, I was like, brilliant. If Arsenal are going to sign players like that, they are not remotely going to close the gap on us whatsoever. So I was happy if they're signing those types of players. Still linked to and talking about Eze, but for that to happen, obviously, because they want the Gyökeres, they're quite nearish PSR, let's say that is our info. So a sale has to happen. Now, people forget about this. As much as Lego Head has spent money galore, he will chop people. Always think of the left-back situation. Do you remember when he spent a load of money on Kieran Tierney as the option? Didn't work out. Done. Brings in Zinchenko. Zinchenko didn't work out. Done, isn't he? Then brings Lewis. They will just cut players if it doesn't work. They've done that so many times. He's not afraid to spend a bob or two, is he, Lego head? And now Martinelli, who had a bit of a disastrous season last season. Yeah, Trev, I mean, they've even offered him to the Saudi side, but Martinelli doesn't seem keen. Doesn't seem like there's many takers because of the price they want. But Arsenal would happily sell Martinelli right now.
Can I ask something that's inspired by something mentioned there in the chat? And apologies, I didn't catch your name as it was flitting by. Is there a world where there's a little bit of a flip around and the Gyökeres thing dies a death, and Arsenal now seeing an opportunity go balls out for Isak? Because we know they're willing to spend as much money as Lego Head decides he wants to throw at the wall. He really is he has been backed. Is that even remotely possible, do you think?
I don't think they've got those finances right now, hence trying to sell Martinelli to look at Eze and other players as well as Gyökeres. I think for all the talk, Gyökeres still, and obviously you're working in pound euros conversions according to the reports, it still seems like he will be around £60 million less than Isak if that fee is to get done, isn't it? And I don't think without selling that player like a Martinelli, they can make the jump. I think as well, Arsenal also know they've put all their eggs and really tried to go down the other route when Isak's turned them down early doors, which was great. So you never say never, but I just can't see that one at all.
Yeah, just wanted to address a concern. I see another person or two people with the word worried. Lads, enjoy this. This is fun. Yeah. Genuinely enjoy this. Newcastle are up next. It's not going well for them. Let's just say that. It looks like they're going to lose their star man. They have had, knockbacks by high-level players like Cunha and Buemo, young Delap. We famously Ekitike as well. João Pedro. My God, it's not going well for Newcastle. The little 16-year-old boy on growth hormones that is Eddie Howe, I just think he must be really hitting a little bit of a wall at this stage. I imagine the frustration levels are very, very high. The only links we're seeing are people like Vissa. Can you explain why, with all the money that they have, it's so difficult for them to attract, given the Champions League as a carrot, players of the likes of the level of Cunha and Mbuemo choosing United over them? I find that must be massively disheartening for them.
I think it is. There's still always a reality in football in terms of even when clubs get money, you've still got to build your brand, haven't you, and your reputation. People forget that how long Manchester City had to get to the level they're at now and how long it took with when the Thai Prime Minister owned them and all those players they bought, like Rabi. You have to go through that cycle. You can't just build a reputation. And I think Newcastle ultimately finding out that, no disrespect to them, because I've got a lot of time for Newcastle, but United, a million times a bigger name, even with their current situation. Players will pick clubs like United and Chelsea a little bit because of the name and also because of wages at the same time. Newcastle seem to have set this level, isn't it? This room at 150 grand a week, which is, along with the legacy element, has cost them, like you say, Delap, Cunha, and Buemo. Ekitike didn't really want to go there. James Trafford, the keeper, they messed around with that all summer, and now he looks like he's heading to Manchester City. I mean, even the Conor Gallagher thing they were messing with. And, Vissa, they lowballed as well, didn't it? I mean, the thing, though, that it comes back to for me, who would have thought it would have been a bad idea to let your manager control all the transfers and let him put his nephew in there as well as his assistant type of thing? Like, who would have thought, Trev, that could be disastrous? And also, people are ignoring this with Newcastle. They have a lot of players over 30. They were the oldest average age, in the Premier League. That squad needs a lot of work. And you think of some of their heroes or players who did well for them last season, like Dan Burn, 33. I think the winger Jacob Murphy. I think he's 32. You know, there's a lot of old players like Shaw, isn't there, at Newcastle? The average age of that squad really needs to come down, and they are struggling to get anyone through the door at the moment, which also adds to the bit of, if you do just accept that Isak money, by the way, you can start buying players and improve your squad that way at the same time.
Yeah, and just to address, I see Alejandro saying he doesn't think it's Eddie Howe's fault. I actually don't really think it's necessarily Eddie Howe's fault either. What I do think is it might be Newcastle's fault because Eddie Howe is there. And I don't mean that as a criticism directly of Eddie Howe. What I'm saying is, if Newcastle, I don't understand where they are in their stage of development. When City were like this, they were appointing big name managers regardless.
Yeah,
they were buying big stars. I've always said this, that I could not believe Eddie Howe scraped in every year that he has so far. 100%. And I keep waiting for them to make this big, attractive proposition for footballers to work with as their head man there, and it's not happening. And it's not Eddie Howe's fault that he's Eddie Howe. He's clearly a good coach. I just find it weird that they're doing this kind of they're still with him, as opposed to going for someone really high profile who might help them swing a few deals. Anyway, that's just that. Next story.
Just on that, no, you're so right. It's smart to say. You look through the Premier League. Everton got Carlo Ancelotti to Goodison Park, and look at all the players he got when you stuck the money up. Like you said, City, they got the Pellegrinis, the Mancinis because of the money. It's not trying to be derogatory about Eddie Howe, but he's not got that pull, has he? Whereas if they spent money on a big managerial appointment, players would go, tell you what, if so-and-so's in charge, I'll take a gamble on this one.
Yeah. It's just really jarred with me lately. Going into this stage last season, I couldn't believe he was still there. Anyway, they have their plan and they're sticking to it. We'll go to United next, Dave, and they seem to be again. Of course, it's Man United. They're going to do business. I don't know that they're necessarily able to get the exact type of player they want. They have signed good footballers. And again, it will depend on the blend and the mix and how they go under the new manager. Maybe he'll come out of the traps flying this year. But what I find interesting is that they're not being able to do the business they want to do. For example, they're struggling to get rid of Garnacho. Talk to us about what's happening there, because there seems to be a bit of tension with Villa.
Just why I'm doing that, just a shout out to all the Geordies, especially Geordie T 1974, who sent me a DM saying, "You took shit, eat my ass." So good evening, Geordie T 1974. Good seeing you, a listening and loyal viewer. But anyway,
thanks for the watch. All helps in the stats, lad. Fair play to you.
It'd be nice, Geordie T, if you could stick a like on there as well. But anyway, going there. So, I mean, United have been funny, haven't they? Because that Mbeumo thing just went on and on and on. And eventually, they paid the full price for that haggling and messing around. They just drew it out for absolutely no reason. And in terms of weird offers, as is said there from John Percy, the Telegraph, a loan offer to Villa for Emi Martinez. When Villa instantly, what are you talking about? Loan you Emi Martinez. You pay the fee or, it doesn't happen. But also an inquiry for Ollie Watkins, who I'm not saying he's a bad player at all, don't get me wrong, but I think he is 29 now as well, isn't he, Ollie Watkins? He's, he is knocking on. It just seems a strange move. So they are trying to get players through the door, but they've not had the best of summers, even with Kuna and Mbeumo. It just seems to have knocked on, and they haven't got anyone out, bar one player, which we'll talk about. But Garnacho's the one they're having problems with, as in he wants to stay in the Premier League and no one's prepared to pay it because no one thinks he's worth the 70 million quid or so that Manchester United are asking for at the same time. And obviously there's question marks around his temperament, his social media post, which we'll come to as well, about a certain move. So yeah, they're just I think the best thing we can say about United, which is maybe a sweetness after all those years we had in the 90s, they're just direct to us a little bit now, aren't they, on where we sit? And it's a brilliant thing to be able to say.
Yeah, I've told the story many, many times. I was out in a pub in around 2003 or somewhere in that era, and met a guy I went to primary school with, and he was a Man United fan and a bit of a knobhead. And he condescendingly looked over at me and said, "Yous are no threat." And it stung because it was true, Dave.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about them now. And I'm going to wring every last bit of joy out of it. I don't care how petty it is. We'll wrap up then with some other around the houses news. I'm going to leave these ones to you to order because, to be honest, the through line is not very clear to me. There's a lot of connectors and you'd be best placed to do that job.
Yeah, Morgan Gibbs White. I mean, there was that release clause. It looked like Tottenham were going to swoop in, weren't they? But then there was talk of a legal challenge and all sorts of things. And funnily enough, Morgan Gibbs White is back in Portugal training with Nottingham Forest. We'll wait to see if anything develops on that. Callum Wilson, who left Newcastle on a free, looked like he was going to do a deal at West Ham, but that's fallen through at the same time. On the screen there as well, Son. A lot of talk that LAFC are trying to do a deal for as well. That it was linked to Saudis earlier in the window, but we'll wait to see if anything happens on that. I think a lot of Reds have got a little soft spot for Heung-min Son, haven't they? I think there's a lot of people who thought when Mane left or a similar player, almost a player that never played for Liverpool, but you could see in a red shirt because of his character and the attributes. But speaking of Spurs, talking with Bayern Munich over Palhinha. Do you remember the former Fulham boy who's gone there and just, to be honest, just gone into the absolute abyss at the same time as well? And then the final one, your fellow countryman, Evan Ferguson, he has gone on loan to Roma, hasn't he? So he's now in the Italian league. Might well do almost there. Do you remember Tammy Abraham? He went on loan, didn't he, to Roma, tore it up, AC Milan. So we'll see how it works for Evan Ferguson. But yeah, a lot of things going on in the wider Premier League.
I saw the reveal photo or official post on Twitter for Evan Ferguson in his Roma kit. And I, honest to God, thought it was a Photoshop job. It's a wild move, and I hope it works out really well for him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent there in that kid. Right, wrap it up around the world then. We'll start with Osimhen. And Osimhen's been on our radar, of course, because he is a certain level of striker. There are very few of that level around the place. But it looks like the bash cans have been digging around in the bottom of the sofa, Dave.
It's, yeah, the bash cans, the presidents of Turkey have got together. And I mean, as it's on the screen there, look at what Mana and De Laurentiis have got out of them. 40 million euros now. 35 million in another year. 10% on future profit. And a bonus based on how many goals he scored, which, by the way, I think he got like 30 goals in the Turkish league last season as well. And they even agreed that he can't be sold to an Italian club for 2 years. You could almost imagine De Laurentiis just shouting out wild demands and the Bashkans going, okay, because we just want the player that badly, and to get him on board with Sané as well. Also, speaking of Turkey, Juan Duran, he's there now, isn't he? He is with Fenerbahce and Trev. I mean, this is a loan. There's rumours the loan fee itself is around 8 million euros. But remember, he went on that big wage deal from Villa to them for about, as rumoured, 300,000 a week. Fenerbahce are covering it all, 100%. So do you know what I mean? They're paying like an 8 million loan fee and 300k a week. So Turkey and their Bashkans are really going for it to try and make a splash and obviously tap into that Champions League cash. They did try Besiktas. They tried for Emerson Royal. Do you remember the former fullback who was at Tottenham, wasn't he, not that long ago? But he's chosen to go back home to Flamengo. But yeah, the Turkish sides, the Bashkans, having a right pop this season.
Very interesting. Really is interesting to see. They're obviously really trying to get that. It feels like a coordinated thing. Benfica are up next because they are looking for a couple of attackers.
Yeah, Ricardo Rios, the he's Ecuadorian, sorry, isn't he? Or Venezuela, I can't remember. Apologies, but he's gone from Palmeiras to there. Trev, do you remember João Felix? Do you remember when he was signed for that? What was it? 100-odd million for Atletico Madrid, and he was going to be the next superstar. And his career was just slowly progressed downwards, hasn't it? And now he could be going back to Benfica after all this time. I mean, that is absolutely crazy how far his star has fallen and where he is now. So he's keen on it because he's not in favour at AC Milan at all. So, yeah, almost a shame that one, but probably a good lesson to never believe FIFA as an indicator of good players.
Yeah, I don't think people I think people underestimate when they say it as a joke, the level of influence that can have, even if it's just on players' ideas of other players. I think that's a real thing. Second last story then for us is Marcus Rashford and Barcelona, a wild one.
I've said to you before, I've always got a soft spot for Marcus Rashford because of his charity work and things we do. And I never want to see United successful, but I've never liked the way they've treated Marcus Rashford. And I mean, he's on loan last season at Aston Villa, and now he's done the loan deal with Barcelona. I think it shows just how much United wanted to get rid of him and how much Rashford wanted to move on. He actually accepted like a reduced wage to then do the loan deal where United still play part of it, apparently. But yeah, I mean, to be fair to Marcus Rashford, I don't feel too sorry for him because he's gone for a club that had a stinker and finished, 15th last season to now playing for the Spanish champions, hasn't he? But what it also tells you is, do you remember there's all those stories that Barcelona are going to buy Luis Diaz? Well, Barcelona have ended up with young Rooney Badridge, I think it's pronounced, for $2.5 million, and Marcus Rashford on loan. So that tells you about the realistic chances Barcelona ever had of stumping up that cash. And yeah, Mr. 365 boy saying there, it was done the work for Scholes. We did a lot of good things. So I've always had a soft spot for Marcus Rashford, and I'm glad he's got a good move for him.
Yeah, I guess they ran out of levers to pull there at Barca. The last story then for us today is a lack of success for Saudi in attracting players, which is no surprise to Liverpool fans because we know they've been waving buckets of cash in the direction of a couple of our superstars, and they have a very strong tradition of doing that and getting some of them. But it looks as if things are not working out. A couple of collapsed deals is the latest Saudi news.
Yeah, there's a few journos saying that there's quite a lot of the players that have moved to Saudi now looking to get back. But in terms of incomings, there's a bit of scrutiny around how the Saudi clubs are now doing their business because it's kind of moved from the central committee approving it to a lot of the clubs, which has made it, easier in terms of speed and essence. But this is the big thing to keep an eye on with the Saudi side. There's been a few where they've agreed the fee, they've agreed the terms with the players, they've gone up to signing and they've changed their mind. The Saudi clubs have just pulled the pull at the last minute and go, nah, we think we can get a better player. And that's what they did to David Hanko, who is now an Atletico Madrid player. So he's moved from Feyenoord. It looked like he was going to be at Al Nassr, but Al Nassr went, actually, no, we think we can get better players. So despite agreeing terms and everything with the club and the player, just pulled the plug at the very last second, as he's basically got the pen in his hand there, seems to be the story. So there's that. Also, another Saudi club. Do you remember Eric Bailly, who used to play for United and went to Villarreal? He was set to move to a Saudi club. Did the exact same thing there as well, Trev. It was all agreed if Villarreal agreed with the player, but literally as he was going to sign the contract, the Saudis went, actually, on second thoughts, we'll just leave it, which is a very odd way of doing business. And also, I mean, we mentioned things like Saudis and Darwin. I think we need to be 100% certain that's signed, or even if there was an offer or anything like that coming in. But it's just interesting to see how it works with the Saudi side, because it's not good faith or good practice in the football world to do that, is it really? You know, agree it with the club, agree it with the player, get it all done, and then at the very last second change the mind. And by the way, having sort of delved further, this is not a case of a player's failed a medical or anything like that. They have literally just changed their mind at the very last second.
Yeah, it's not exactly the kindest way to operate. But look, as you say, we may have to endure a little bit of that if the summer progresses and we haven't gotten rid of a couple of lads who are clearly not wanted at the club. And it's a harsh way to speak about it, that use that terminology, but that's the reality of it. We are looking to get rid of a couple. It's simple as that. Dave, it's been fantastic to catch up and get back into the saddle here with you on the transfer show. I have no doubt that it will not be a full week before we're back with another one. That just seems to be the way of it. For now, to you, thanks for gathering all that data, and to all the thousands of you out there watching live, really appreciate you guys a lot. Spread the word if you like the show, and we will see you very soon.